You know that moment when someone asks, "How's the weather?" and something inside you just shuts down, not because you're rude, not because you don't care about people, but because the conversation feels like you're both reading from a script neither of you wrote. And while everyone around you seems perfectly comfortable exchanging pleasantries about traffic and weekend plans, you're standing there wondering if you're fundamentally broken. Here's what most people won't tell you. Hating small talk isn't a flaw in your personality. It's actually a window into how your mind processes connection, meaning, and the architecture of human relationships. Let's start with something psychologists have observed for decades but rarely explain in plain terms. Human beings don't all seek the same depth of social engagement, and this isn't about being introverted or extroverted, though that plays a role. It's about what researchers call need for cognition and tolerance for ambiguity in social contexts. Some people genuinely find comfort in the predictable rhythm of surface-level exchanges because it creates social lubrication without demanding emotional investment. It's safe, it's structured, and it signals belonging without vulnerability. But there's another group, people whose brains are wired to seek substantive stimulation, who experience small talk not as a warm-up to connection, but as a barrier to it. When you're forced to discuss the weather while your mind craves understanding someone's fears, dreams, or the philosophy that guides their choices, the mismatch creates a kind of cognitive dissonance that feels almost physically uncomfortable. This brings us to the concept of existential intelligence, a term that emerged from Howard Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences. People high in existential intelligence are driven by big questions. Why we're here, what makes life meaningful, how we construct identity. For these individuals, conversations that don't touch on values, ideas, or genuine emotional states can feel like speaking a foreign language fluently, but without ever saying anything true. It's not that they can't engage in small talk. They absolutely can, but doing so requires them to suppress the part of their cognition that's constantly searching for patterns, meaning, and depth. Imagine being a musician forced to listen to the same three notes repeated endlessly when you know an entire symphony exists. That's what small talk can feel like to someone whose default mode is philosophical or introspective. But there's another psychological dimension here that's equally important: attachment style and authenticity needs. According to research in relational psychology, people with secure attachment who also score high on authenticity scales often struggle with interactions that feel performative. Small talk, by its very nature, is a performance. It's a social ritual where the content matters less than the function, which is to establish non-threatening presence and signal mutual acknowledgement. For someone whose relational blueprint prioritizes emotional honesty and genuine self-disclosure, this ritualistic exchange can trigger a subtle but persistent sense of disconnection. You're talking, but you're not connecting. You're present, but you're not seen. And for individuals whose sense of self is tightly bound to being authentic, this creates an internal conflict that registers as discomfort or even aversion. Now consider this from a neurological perspective. Research in social cognition shows that meaningful conversation activates different brain regions than superficial talk. Deep, substantive dialogue engages areas associated with empathy, theory of mind, and reward processing, the same networks that light up when we feel truly understood or when we understand someone else at a fundamental level. Small talk, by contrast, activates more procedural, habitual neural pathways. It's processed almost like a social script that your brain can run on autopilot. For people whose brains are reward-sensitive to intellectual and emotional depth, small talk doesn't just feel empty, it literally provides less neurological satisfaction. You're not broken. Your brain simply has a different reward threshold for social interaction. Here's where it gets interesting. Society tells us that comfort with small talk is a marker of social competence, and in many ways it is. But what if we reframed it? What if hating small talk is actually a sign that you value depth over breadth, quality over quantity, and truth over comfort? The psychologist Carl Rogers talked about congruence, the alignment between your inner experience and outer expression. When you engage in small talk that feels hollow, you're operating in a state of incongruence, and that misalignment creates psychological tension. You're not failing at socializing. You're succeeding at noticing when a social interaction doesn't match your core values. The real challenge isn't learning to love small talk. It's learning to navigate a world where small talk serves a legitimate function, building rapport, establishing safety, creating social cohesion, while also honoring your need for depth. This might mean getting better at transitioning from surface to substance, asking follow-up questions that invite real answers, or simply accepting that some conversations will be shallow, and that's okay because not every interaction needs to be profound. It also means recognizing that your discomfort with small talk might be signaling something important, that you're someone who needs meaningful connection to feel truly alive, and that's not a weakness, it's a blueprint for the kinds of relationships and experiences you should be seeking. So if you hate small talk, you're not broken. You're just wired for a different kind of conversation. And in a world that often confuses noise for connection, that might be exactly what we need more of. If this resonates with you, you're not alone. There's an entire community of people navigating the same tension between social expectation and inner truth. Consider subscribing to explore more about the psychology behind how we connect, why we feel the way we do, and what it means to live authentically in a world built on scripts.